Hey everybody. For this third episode of the Bitcoin OP UXUI podcast, we talked to Dennis Reimann, a BTCPay contributor, UI engineer and developer. We talked about how designers and engineers work together, BTCPay Server contributions, filling multiple roles in a project, self-initiated projects, Bitcoin design community building by Square Crypto, and a lot more. Hope you like it. Hey Dennis, how are you?
Hi, Pedro. Thanks for inviting me. Yes, I'm fine.
Yeah,
How are you?
Thank you so much for joining us. How's everything in Germany?
Weather's pretty bad right now, but I hope we'll have better weather soon. And the rest, the whole Corona situation is mostly over right now. At least it feels like it's getting better. And let's see how this goes.
That's good to hear. I know that you've been hoping for a betterment in weather in Germany, as you mentioned in a couple of your posts, where you I've been following up a little bit on you and finding it really interesting how you've been dedicating some very specific time to open source projects.
Yeah.
How did you get into that? Have you always had a background in computer science, or how did you end up working for these open source projects?
Well, I've been a freelancer for 10 years now, so I've been working on all kinds of client projects. In the first years, oftentimes in iOS and backend, but over the years I switched to doing front-end development only. And I some time last year I talked to Cooks, who's also part of the BTCPay Server team. And he told me about his journey, and actually it was quite similar to mine because he was also tired of working on client projects, and that was something I felt as well. And I said to myself, I don't want to work the next 10 years like I've done in the last 10 years. And so I decided to, kind of jump the gun, save some money up and use it to work the rest of 2020 on open source stuff.
It's amazing. I've gone through your website, and you can tell that the type of work that you have done in the past is somewhat different from what you've been doing right now, just mostly because of the nature of open source.
Yeah, I've been involved in quite some large open source projects before, so this is nothing new for me. But dedicating one's whole time to this and being totally free on what to work on, this is something very different from doing client projects and staying in Jira all day and working with these kind of tasks.
So you switched Jira for GitHub.
Yeah, mostly GitHub and MetaMost.
So is your background, would you say, mostly in engineering and coding, or do you also have a background in design? Because I know that in your little small signature line in your website, you call yourself a UI engineer, which was, I thought it was interesting to see. I never saw anybody go that focused on something.
Yeah, this phrase has a whole backstory on its own. I'm a trained media designer. I'm coming from a design and UI focused background, but during the years and during my studies, I became more interested in programming in general, and like I said, also worked on backend projects like with Ruby on Rails in the past. And during all those years, I've still kept interest in the user-facing side of software. So I've been always involved with UI and UX stuff. And together with a friend of mine, Jan Persil, he's also here from Germany, I started an initiative called UI Engineering, which has the goal of bridging the gap between design and programming, so that in the intersection, that's where the magic happens. And Jan is a designer who has also been very interested in programming because this helps him to get the job done. And I'm a programmer who has a design background, so I know how to articulate and communicate with designers, and so we just wanted to evolve this and make it clear to more people that actually in the intersection of both of these fields is where the magic happens.
I can absolutely subscribe to that. I myself, I've gone through a communication design degree, which at the time, a good friend of mine that we used to work together kind of drove me into really exploring coding. And at the
Mm.
time, my level of coding is very rudimentary, but it allows me to do some prototyping. It basically, we all started with pretty much dabbling with Flash and ActionScript, but
Yeah,
then figure out how to transition to PHP and JavaScript, and now that kind of laid a foundation for me to actually understand and be able to go deeper on even Ruby, or much deeper understanding of JavaScript, even Java and Python.
yeah.
And it's amazing because it gives you, even though I will never be able to really engineer something from scratch that's absolutely perfect and very solid code, uh,
Yep.
it allows you to test stuff and understand other people's code and also understand the process.
Yeah, and like I said, I mean, having at least a bit of programming background allows you to go one step further into the other, uh, into the direction of the other field, and maybe even if you're working on a project alone, it helps you to, to get stuff done more easily. I mean, most of what we've found over the years in which front end development evolved was like back in the days, people were coming up with layouts and screens they made in Photoshop, and this doesn't happen anymore. I mean, um, if you want to be really efficient and have some good output, make this more worthwhile journey for both design and programming, then this actually the design phase has to happen in the browser, and this is where Jan and I found where the efficiency really is, because we were both sitting in front of one of our computers and coming up with stuff that was actually implemented in real templates using real CSS, etc. And so once you've reached that stage, you are able to ship really early.
Yeah, and I think that's a really fascinating way of changing the design process. I can see that, especially with these bigger ventures and bigger companies that are working on their own design systems and opening up, you can tell that there's already an effort to design a little bit with code, as opposed
Yeah,
to always keep everything super pixel perfect in a Photoshop file, all
correct. Yeah,
everything divided in layers. It's really fascinating to see the design stages and even some of the sketching stages move onto open platforms like GitHub, and to see designers trying to talk the same language
yeah,
and evolve the design through code as opposed through just sharing visual sketches back and forth. They're actually
yeah.
testing the finished project. They compile the project or they load up the website. It's challenging, but I think in the end it becomes much more efficient.
Yeah, it's challenging for both parties because none of those are actually trained to do that. I mean, neither programmers have or at least in my studies, design wasn't a big part of the program in the university, and it's the other way around. So designers aren't used to picking up an editor or firing up the console and executing bash commands. But once you've bridged that gap and both sides can help each other with that. Once you've done that and worked this way, have felt how much more efficient and and the better the output is. I mean, you don't want to go back to working
Hmm.
like before using Photoshop screens, because stuff happens and needs to evolve so quickly that oftentimes those screens that a designer carefully crafted are outdated maybe just by the next week. And if you're having the single source of truth for what's visual on the screen living in code, then you can just change it, run or deploy it, and it changes everywhere. Like in presentations, we often have the example of changing the font face, or maybe changing the header of a website. And if you want to do that through several screens you've done in Photoshop, this is really tedious work. And using code, you can just change a few lines of CSS, refresh the browser, and you're good to go.
Yeah, and you can tell that designers are becoming increasingly aware of that, because
Yep.
you can tell that the design software, especially for designing digital products, applications, or websites,
Yep.
they're all going towards that direction, creating components and symbols and trying to push users to create a design system that kind of feels like a library, and each object becomes an object or a class. And it actually, I think, helps designers have a more of a programmatic and systematic mindset
Yep.
that translates extremely well to coding and engineering, because the same way you say, okay, now we need to round the corners of this button. Okay, who's gonna do it? It's either you have a symbol created, but that symbol needs to be created very aware of what its end purpose is. So you can kind of define that the basic color is gonna be this, and the type and the padding. So you can then reuse that and just change one single time, the same way that you would change a couple of lines of code to change the styles of the same object throughout the whole experience. It definitely also forces everybody to think much more consistently.
And to be fair, I mean, like you explained, the tools like Sketch or so evolved quickly over the last years. We've been working like this back in the days when those tools didn't come with a perspective like that. I mean, we've been doing this pre pattern library in Sketch, and yeah, for us, this feels like these tools are playing catch up now to the reality of what actually needs to happen and what the industry demands. But yeah, like you said, it also eases the way to this, because yeah, designers are used to tools like Sketch, and the more they push them in this direction by offering features like the pattern library, the better it is. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, I remember about maybe 10 years ago, was very reluctant to move any kind of web or app design into Photoshop. So I was actually working in InDesign, which now sounds super silly to say this, but with InDesign, just with master pages, I was able to think of master pages as templates, so I could
Yeah.
just change a couple of things once or twice and focus on the content when I needed to focus on the content. And it took me a while to kind of move away from that. Finally, I skipped Photoshop entirely and just jumped into from InDesign and Illustrator to XD, Adobe XD. I also never really delved too much into Sketch, just because I thought XD was more familiar.
Hmm.
But now, actually, coming back to Figma after trying it maybe a year or two ago, Figma has come a long way, and it's really interesting that everything is happening on the browser.
Yeah.
Everything is kind of open. Um, it's really fascinating to see where things are going.
Yeah, most of the tools are evolving rather quickly, and you also see integrations of pattern library tools like Storybook, also
Hmm.
into tools like Zeppelin, etc. So yeah, for me, it's nice to see that this bridge we felt some years ago is finally coming together.
Um, how do you feel that um is important, or would you at least recommend for designers that have been very exclusively focused on visual design? Would you recommend that they try to start understanding a little bit of the computer language that would eventually be the main foundation of their designs in the real world?
Um, Maybe not exactly a programming language, but I'd say it's pretty necessary right now to know a bit of CSS and HTML if you're designing something, and yeah, at least working on websites and web apps. Because oftentimes it's not just that you have to outright implement stuff yourself, but you need to know about the constraints this environment comes with, and it helps very much to be familiar with HTML, CSS, and being able to come up with a website yourself.
Hmm. I agree. I would even go far and to say that uh, everybody should learn a little bit of coding fundamentals, at least to understand. I don't think anybody should particularly focus on any specific language, but definitely try to understand how a computing language works in its basics, just to understand how stuff works. I sometimes I like to trace the parallel between what a designer does now and what a designer used to do maybe 30 years ago, when, or maybe even a little bit more, before desktop publishing and before computers, when everything was a little bit more manual. Designers really needed to understand what what they were doing and how that would be translated into, let's say, a printed surface. But
Hmm?
somehow, with the distribution of computer systems, I think it became a little too easy and everybody can do it. But then we don't really, we neglected a little bit to understand, especially for people that are working with digital products. Like if you're working in print, you're still very much in care of how, what colors are you going to use, how
Yeah,
the book is going to be bound. But there's there's a lot of, I think, neglect on how the people's designs are going to be implemented once you release the design and you just give it to the developer, and then you have to go back, QA everything, but then you don't speak the same language. So
yeah,
how can you communicate that something is needs to go a little further up without saying, hey,
yeah.
maybe the let's adjust the base unit of the padding.
Correct. Evolving common language is one of the biggest parts where we felt success in the whole UI engineering approach, because um, yeah, each of these groups, programmers, designers, and project managers, have their own silo of communicating or mental models of things, and once you get together with all of those sides at a table and discuss things, you will have to evolve a common language for what you're talking about, and this is also a big part where the efficiency comes from, because even though this takes a while, once you're set up, you're good to go, and it feels like a natural process for everyone involved, and yeah, having a shared language is a very big part of that.
Yeah, i I think, unfortunately, the way, I think it's changing. I'm pretty sure it's changing. I haven't been in school for a while, but at least the way my course was organized was very much, uh, this is the design part, and then here's some extra stuff for anybody that's interested in a little bit of HTML. So there
Yeah,
were a little bit of workshops and stuff, but it was outside the official curriculum.
and I
Somehow,
mean, yeah.
mhm. No, no, go ahead.
I mean, if you're curious, the web is a great medium in itself, because it provides so rapid feedback. You do something in your editor, and you can try stuff. You can't break anything, and once you once you hit save and refresh, you immediately see the results. And yeah, it's for me, it's a great environment to work in, and yeah, I find this to be very satisfying to get this kind of immediate feedback and to be able to rapidly prototype stuff.
Hmm. What role would you say, besides UI engineer, would you say you have in these open source projects you've been working on?
Well, it's actually that's one of the great parts of open source. You can do whatever you want to work on because there's no one telling you what to do. And at least for me, it's like all over the place. And that's something I totally enjoy as well because, like I said, I know backend programming as well. Right now, I'm trying to learn C# and ASP.NET because that's what the BTCPay server is written in. And I also did my fair share of Elixir programming back in the days. So I do all kinds of things. Right now, I'm also trying to familiarize myself a bit with another project called the Raspberry Blitz, which is an open source project for getting your own full node with Lightning up and running. And so I recently did a bit of bash programming for that as well. And yeah, I enjoy all kinds of things. So yeah.
I was sneaking through your GitHub repositories and I saw a lot of interesting projects that I had no idea existed.
Okay, like what, for
The
example?
the what was it called? You had kind of a node, the Blitzbank dashboards.
Yeah, that's something I set up in the early days of Lightning to learn a bit more about Lightning. That was
Mhm.
my approach to build something like people are now more familiar with, like the RTL interface or Thunderhub, which gives you ways to manage your Lightning node and balances, etc. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a great way to learn how a tool actually works. One of the ways I found myself having really grow my confidence in Bitcoin was by way of making a small website that interacted with the Bitcoin network, and that's how I kind of understood. Okay, actually, you need to choose previous outputs to send inputs, and before you sign them, like, oh, this is actually the best way to understand Bitcoin is to actually try to use it not just by clicking the button, but in the future when I'm designing a button, I actually know what's happening on the background. I
Yeah.
never done anything with Lightning Network, to be honest. It's a little still too complex for me, but hope to one day also spend some time doing some project that's, I don't know, some usually I start these projects very aware that they're gonna go nowhere, but then there's like a peak of enthusiasm in the middle of the process,
Yeah.
like, oh my god, what if this turns into the the killer
Yeah.
app? And then no, it doesn't really, but it's still such a valuable learning experience.
Yeah, I think enthusiasm is a big part of the whole learning experience. And yeah, like I said, immediate feedback is rather important. And so my approach regarding most of these topics is like diving headfirst in and trying to come up with something I can see, feel, use, or whatever. I mean, yeah, and if in doubt, there's also testnet, and you can't lose your money playing with that.
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah. I'm in the camp that I mean I do like testnet for the that first initial crazy test, but then I put like $50 aside worth of Bitcoin. Okay, these are gonna be the test coins.
That's great too, because you're having skin in the game, and yeah.
Yeah, well, you make a bunch of smallest amount possible transaction. You set a price for yourself. I I like it that way better, to be
Yeah.
honest. So, for instance, with these projects that you have on the side, and even with the BTCPay server work that you're doing, are you mostly, do you see yourself with any design role, or are you mostly just implementing designs that are pre-existing?
For my own projects, I come up with all of that myself. If it's more complex, I turn to Jan, and he helps me out. and for BTCPay, I wouldn't say that I'm the design person there, because I'm excited about stuff other than design more than I want to solely focus on design. And there have been people in the past, and also hopping in recently, taking on some of the design tasks, where I think my role is again bridging this gap between design and actually implementing the front end part of this. And yeah, that's where I feel most efficient. And I think there are other people that can fill the design role better than I can.
Mm-hmm. And do you, when you implement or when you do any pull request, have you ever, I'm sure you sometimes encounter a little bit of a design problem that you also feel needs fixing, or
That's something I'm doing right now. I'm going through the screens or views of the BTCPay Server backend one by one, and just rearranging stuff, or pushing things left and right, moving explanatory text here and there, adding some links to documents, etc. Because BTCPay is really evolving quickly, and oftentimes we just implement something and ship it with a, yeah, let's say rudimentary interface, and approve upon this. And yeah, that's something I try to do right now.
mm-hmm. I share the same feeling. Like for me, it's, although I'm very interested in the design part. Right now, I almost feel like I would love to bring more designers to whatever projects I'm involved with, because I also work a little bit on Bisq. Unfortunately, uh, because my coding skills are probably not on par with yours, it, or not probably, very evidently, uh, it takes me a while to actually understand the process of how to contribute with code.
Yeah.
So I usually just tend to keep myself more in the design part, just because it's a little safer for me. um, but once I was able to actually understand how the software was being compiled and what visual libraries were being used, and once I was able to actually change the code myself, well, I rapidly learned that you need to be really careful with what code you change, because then
Yeah.
your PR won't be accepted.
Yeah.
But it gives you such a sense of empowerment, because now you can actually test stuff, as opposed to just making something really beautiful on a static PNG and share it on an issue on GitHub, and then have everybody be really excited, but then nobody implements it because it's going to be a headache.
Being able to do stuff full stack, I mean, from the visual part through the code, so that it reveals in the actual app, is great, but it's such an effort, and it takes yeah, oftentimes lots of learning. And for people who don't want to go all the way, I mean, one of the easiest things you can help is by doing a screenshot, annotating stuff, and yeah, describing what your problem was, and how you think things can improve on the UI side, by posting an issue and describing this a bit. I mean, one of the first contributions I made to Wasabi Wallet was a thread in which they discussed the UX of their product, and I came up with a new onboarding screen, where I also rearranged stuff in the screenshot, described what my thoughts around this are, what are the problems I felt, and how it could be overcome by switching to the direction I proposed. And this is so valuable feedback, because like I said, oftentimes programmers don't even think about these kinds of problems normal users have. And if we want to yeah, grow Bitcoin beyond our bubble, we have to somehow yeah, bridge the gap to the normal people. And this can easily be done by people just posting an issue and describing their hurdles with like the projects and how they are currently, and maybe come up with a thought of how to improve.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally agree, and I think having this aspect of open source actually helps a lot in understanding how other people issue or post issues, because I feel like there's a good way and a not so good way of communicating feedback sometimes. Especially for designers, I think we have the ability and the tools and the know-how to actually immediately propose something, even if it's not great. I've done this in a couple of projects just because I somehow wanted to have a little bit of authorship also in the project, and just sneak in and start participating more actively in the development of certain projects, and just taking a screenshot, putting it in XD, Figma, or Sketch, and just like cover the existing part of the UI that you want to change. Just draw in a couple of buttons, annotate, and send it back. It actually shows the value much more immediate
Yeah,
than if you were to just write a big text and describe something. Like, you have the tools and the power to actually communicate these ideas much more efficiently if you do it in a visual way. At
yeah,
least
that's true.
that's how I think.
Yeah, and mostly programmers will welcome this participation with open hands. I mean, oftentimes it's stuff they just haven't thought about, and they are very grateful for someone taking the time explaining the thoughts around what they felt was pain using their product, and it's valuable feedback.
Hmm. Yeah, and
So my thought around this would be: don't be shy. Try to propose something and just see how it's received. And if it's bad, they just close the issue. But then you can move on and maybe start over with the next project. But you don't have anything to lose.
mhm,
We all just can gain from this.
absolutely, and sometimes the problems you're pointing out could already be acknowledged by the whole community, but by proposing an option, you're actually maybe either just starting a conversation around it, or
Yeah,
actually that is going to be the solution that nobody has ever thought of. But I feel like there's very little ego in the open source part of the space, at least,
yeah,
that some people are even anonymous. They, who knows, as long as the solution works, it's going to be implemented. If it's not working, it's because you either need to improve it or advocate for it better, but nobody's denying you to do anything just because it's you.
correct.
it's
Yeah.
it's a it either passes the test or it doesn't.
And one more thing I thought about, because you mentioned it being good to just post an annotated screenshot, and that this is rather easy for designers. Oftentimes, this can be a great conversation starter around a topic, because being able to look at something concrete also allows for concrete discussion around things. And maybe it's not the first proposal that actually gets implemented, but the first proposal might start a discussion around this a topic that evolves into something that then can be implemented. And that's totally great as a conversation starter.
Yep. Are you very passionate about open source projects? Were you like that before getting into Bitcoin, or did Bitcoin kind of drove you into the open source space? What
Uh,
came
like I,
first?
like I said, I've been involved in some projects before.
Hmm.
I have a bigger open source project called the UI engine, which is actually a tool to build a design system, pattern library, something similar to Storybook. And I've been used to contributing to other projects as well, because in the front end field, everything's living on GitHub and NPM as well. And so when you're building stuff and find a bug. Oftentimes it's easier to just open a pull request having fixed it than to come up with an issue explaining what's wrong, etc. And so I know this process very well. And but connecting to one of or to an open source project feels more natural in the Bitcoin space, because people are at least I have the impression that people are so passionate about everything, and they have an incentive to evolve all of these projects, and everyone shares a mindset. It feels different than the other ecosystems I've worked in.
I think it actually it feels like it's imperative openness.
Yeah,
You have all
yeah, for
these
sure.
brands uh, calling themselves radical transparent, and oh, we're opening the process. But you can say, okay, you claim this, but how can it be verified? But then you go into the Bitcoin space, and anything that is closed source, it feels like what is really happening behind the
Yeah,
curtain. I don't. It just doesn't feel. It doesn't feel right.
yeah, people are rather skeptic then.
Yeah, and I think that's also a really powerful change in paradigm that I I was I was definitely interested in open source, but mostly I didn't quite understand it. I worked a lot with Drupal before Bitcoin, and I absolutely did not contribute to the project, but I did go through the patches and through the like the small forks of modules that other people developed, and I understood how it was to use a product that was mostly community developed, as opposed to having to wait for the central group of developers to release a new release.
Yeah,
It was very refreshing, even though I at the time I didn't really go too much into it. I actually had to wait for Bitcoin for to push me into that direction.
yeah.
Definitely.
And well, I know open source from the programmer's perspective and contributing to code, etc. But I'm looking forward to what this will look like in regards to design, and what maybe the whole community that's been initiated by Square Crypto comes up with, because I think open source and design is something different from programming. What's your take on this?
Oof. I'm still trying to figure that one out. I agree, it's definitely different. Right now, I'm to navigate what is changing in my mind a little bit every day. I'm trying to use the model that I know from programming into design, but I recognize that it's never going to be a one-to-one.
Mm.
But what do you think? How do you think it differs?
Well, I mean, or at least what I've seen in regards to, for example, BTCPay Server, is that making steady design progress in open source projects is rather difficult, because, um, yeah, oftentimes people just hop in and want to solve one issue they are maybe having, but for for to evolve the design of a product or app or something, you need to put on a holistic view of what's happening, and this requires a lot of time and effort. And bringing that into an open source project when you just want to solve an issue is is difficult. And yeah, not everyone can set aside the time to work on something full time or for a longer stretch of time. So I think this is one of the challenges.
Do you think that it's that different with coding? For instance, I know that a lot of people come into projects, go in an issue, or just propose a pull request, and they're solving to that particular problem, but then it doesn't pass the review because it broke five other things.
Yeah.
And it's the
Okay.
same.
Yeah.
I think it's the same thing with design. Like, oh, let's make this padding bigger. Okay, but you know that once you do that, then this button is going to be affected in these other 5 screens that you haven't accounted for.
Yeah.
It's trying to change the system through the parts as opposed to thinking holistically about the system. But I imagine that that's both the challenge that exists on design and coding.
Yeah, maybe. Maybe it feels more natural to me because I'm coming from more of a programming background and haven't thought enough about the design side. Yeah, okay.
I don't know. I don't know myself. These are ideas that are also a little bit new to me, and I know that there's a lot of people. It feels like there's more people thinking about it, especially now that definitely with this Square Crypto small design community that it's forming. It's amazing to see other designers interested in this or other UI engineers interested in this, because even though I knew that there were already a couple of people interested, nobody was actually trying to, or at least not that I know of. If I'm incorrect, I would love to know who else is really trying to push for this. But how can we build a process in which the design actually becomes open source for real, and it's not, I don't know yet how to verbalize it, but I think it's going to be a little bit of a slow process to change how people think about the role of the designer in these projects.
Yeah,
And
but yeah,
yeah,
go ahead.
and just also how do we take these great features of working with code where you can remove a line, add a line, uh, remove a file and substitute it for another file, and have all of that very well versioned and documented through GitHub or Git or any other system. How do we do that same thing with design? How can we branch a project without having to or have it already in code? Because although I think that we should start doing things in code more often and earlier in the process, I still think that I'm always going to start a little bit, not necessarily with pen and paper, but I'm always going to start sketching a little bit before I actually start writing any code, just because it saves me some time to actually sketch.
Yeah, then let me use this as an opportunity to show the efforts we are right now having in BTCPay Server. And if someone out there listening to this is interested in maybe finding out how to do design in open source, then hop on, come
Mhm.
on, and yeah, let's explore these topics together, because we are right now looking for people who want to do exactly that, and maybe help with some of the outstanding tasks there are.
There's a lot of enthusiasm in joining these projects, but then it's like you said, it takes some time. You need to really know the project, not just the part you're trying to change, and then you have to really commit to advocate for your changes, because sometimes
Yeah.
people are busy with other stuff. So there's priorities, there's other bugs that are security related that probably will take priority over everything else. It,
Yeah, and to be honest, it also took me a while, even though I was familiar with some of the technology, at least in the front end stack. It took me a while to really get accustomed to it and practically work on stuff. But again, if there's a designer out there, I'd like to hold your hand on this, and yeah, let's get stuff done.
Mhm. Yeah, there's definitely a lot of opportunity, especially now with the world moving towards more of a digital space, with Bitcoin growing, open source and design growing. It's very exciting times. And
Yeah,
actually, this I think this it's even more interesting now because, for instance, I know that BTCPay Server has been getting a lot of, not a lot of, I don't know, I consider it a lot, but funding and
yeah,
grants from other companies, which I would imagine gives everybody that's working on the project a little bit of financial security to actually work consistently every week on the project, because a lot of these problems, they might be very self-evident, but the solution, even if it's also very clear and obvious, it all takes time do the first implementation test, fix, iterate, test, user test. There's this whole spectrum of activities that take a long time, that it's just not about designing in code.
Yeah.
It's, I think, having these bigger companies or anybody support these projects, it's very, I think it's really, really important. I know
Yeah.
that Wasabi has its own revenue, but BTCPay Server uh, can't really monetize as of yet.
Yeah, right. And like you mentioned, even though some things might be obvious, etc., they still need to be implemented, and someone needs to be working on this. And yeah, this takes time and effort, also with testing stuff, documenting things, and yeah, oftentimes this is not possible when you're having another full-time job, and that's also why I decided to, at least for uh, quite some time, stop working on client project and focus on these kinds of projects in the open source field. Yeah, and it's great that in the Bitcoin space there's so many companies funding initiatives like that, and yeah, I'm really thankful for the opportunity in this space to work on open source and get paid at least a little bit. I mean, I could make much more money working on client projects, but yeah, there are reasons beyond monetary things. I decided to not do this anymore, at least for the rest of this year.
Yes. Well, I think we're all happy and thankful, and I think that's also, there's also something I think special that happens once you, even if you're working for an open source project, if there's some funding either generated from the project itself, coming from outside funding, like in the form of grants,
Yeah,
once you can actually pay whoever was involved in this small part of the project, it actually motivates a little bit. it
yeah,
it adds urgency, and it actually becomes, this happened for me at least, it stops becoming so much of a, like a, just a curiosity or a little hobby side project, and it becomes, oh, okay, so once I'm actually being paid, I actually need to show up and do the work properly. It's no longer just, I'm just not donating my time. There's actually,
yeah.
there's a transaction happening. So the quality of the work, I think for me at least, I don't know if the quality of the work improved, but definitely my awareness of it increased.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a part of this, but also what I felt is that oftentimes the amount I'm receiving doesn't even matter, because I I also accept donations via Lightning,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes people donate 1 sat, or they donate 21 sats, because that's the default
Mm-hmm.
on my website. And I mean, at least I'm very far away from getting rich working on open source, but these donations, whatever they are, feel like a pat on the back. And this is something I oftentimes, though I knew I was doing very valuable work and receiving lots of money for this in client projects, I really missed some yeah, something like that, the pat on the back in those kinds of projects. And working in the open source field, coming up with ideas, posting them, getting feedback on this, implementing stuff, and seeing this evolve into something I use on a daily basis again. This is so much more satisfying. It makes up for a lot of money forgone on the other side.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I completely agree. There's something very gratifying of having, even if it's small, some monetary recognition from the user base itself, rather from, I feel like when you work for a client, you're
Yeah,
mostly working for that one person as opposed to a group of users.
yeah,
The client will always have the final say and the keys to the gate of what is that the product is gonna look like or it's gonna function. And you're getting recognition from one person. That's potentially not even the user. That's already really biased because they have uh, all kinds of connections to the product already. But once you have that recognition from the user, and you actually, I mentioned that this is very not an egotistical, but it is very gratifying to actually understand that the design you worked on actually is being used and people like it, and it's improving
Yeah.
their experience on the projects, either because it's making it more efficient or just because it feels a little more welcoming.
Yeah, plus oftentimes you are the user yourself, because
Yeah.
why would you otherwise work on this when you're not getting salary or paid for this? So yeah, you're oftentimes scratching your own itch, which makes it even even better, because you know the problems firsthand you're trying to solve, and yeah, by doing so, you also help many other people that might also feel the same problems.
Yeah, I'm very excited to see what happens. Do you have any contacts in real life with other people that are using Bitcoin, or is it
Yeah,
something?
yeah. I mean, the German Bitcoin scene is rather strong. There's a lot going on, mostly in Berlin or Munich. Not so much in the area where I live. Nevertheless, as you said, it's right now everything's becoming more and more digital, and Bitcoin is a topic for me every day. I almost transact every day using Lightning, and for me, this has yeah, become reality. It's not something yeah, rather fancy. I look for using it in the next 5 years. For me, Bitcoin already is a daily topic. I write my invoices solely in denominated in Bitcoin, and yeah.
And that's fascinating. And I know that Germany has always come up as the country with more notes per capita, and I don't know exactly why it is. I'm from Portugal, and we all kind of look up towards Germany as the very punctual and very precise culture in Europe. And I'm just curious, do you have any explanation or any hypothesis to why Germany is so big on Bitcoin?
Well, I maybe I didn't articulate myself so good there. Just because it's a big topic for me and a daily topic, it doesn't mean that everyone here in Germany knows about it.
Oh,
No,
no,
I,
I know, but I remember from long ago. If you went to one of these websites that I don't remember the names, but it was like a map, something like Spend Bitcoin or something, and you
yeah.
go to all these markers. There would be a bunch in New York, a bunch more in San Francisco, but then you went to Germany, and it was pretty much all over the place. And I realized that this is not critical mass yet, but it seems like there's more awareness, I guess.
Yeah, I think there are many people being technically interested in it here, and a growing scene of people also being economically interested in it. But at least for we don't have to use it here. I mean, the euro is is a mostly stable currency. I'd say we don't have problems like people in Venezuela or Argentina, and yeah. So I don't know why this is. I think it's mostly a matter of people being interested in the technical side.
Yeah, I know that there's a lot of Portuguese involved in Bitcoin. I know that most of them don't live in Portugal, but it's also it's kind of curious, just trying to understand if there's anything that is derived from very established cultural traits of certain countries or certain geographies in Europe or in the rest of the world. Like absolutely, we don't need. I don't need it that much either in the U.S. But if I had to guess, in the U.S., it's derived, at least from my experience, it's derived more from an economical and then technical and then a little bit more philosophical. In Portugal, I think the technical part came first. Just
Yeah.
as in general, I know that everybody's different and everybody has their own journey, but that's the way I see it. But with Germany, I've always thought, why is it? Is it because like Weimar Germany is still really close, or I
No,
don't.
I don't think so. At least the people I try to talk to and make them aware of potential problems that might arise on the economic side. I don't think there's much learning from from the history.
Okay. How was it that you came across Bitcoin, and how did you first react to it?
I don't remember when I came across it the
Uh,
first time, but I remember 2017 being the time it really sticked. And of course, this was also driven by the price spiraling up.
mhm.
And yeah, I guess for me, it was like seeing Bitcoin having died several times before and somehow still being alive. Yeah, made me curious what's all of this is about. And I came from the technological side. I was interested in how the blockchain works, etc. But I felt somehow quickly that this is more than just a technological phenomenon, and got really interested in the economic side of things. And if you would have told me 5 years ago I'd be interested so much in economics and all the other stuff that Bitcoin brings with it beyond the technicalities, I'd say I would have said, you must be joking.
Yeah.
So
Uh,
I'm totally grateful for all the stuff I've learned um, by by getting to know Bitcoin, not just from a technical side, but but everything that surrounds it. And this is fascinating and still occupying my mind 24/7 nowadays.
it's hard to explain to people that don't
Yeah.
really have an interest in Bitcoin why we're dedicating so much headspace to this. So we kind of met on Slack for Square Cryptos,
Yeah.
where the Steve set up this group that used to be rather small and now it's really big. I think
Yeah, it's
it's in.
grown very quickly.
I think the last time I counted the channel, there were like 300 people. I was like, wow, this is
Yeah,
this.
let's see what sticks, but it's a great start.
I was wondering what do you think if I know that just because the initiative is so open, and I know that everybody that's kind of in a coordinating position doesn't want to impose too much, but what do you hope to get out of it besides just growing this understanding of open design and growing the design in Bitcoin in a more personal note? What do you think you're going to be excited in contributing, or are you still trying to find something that's going to be worthwhile, or maybe you're just looking around and trying to recruit people to work on BTCPay?
No, even though it might have sounded like this, I'm not
Oh, I think
trying
it's the
to
you.
recruit anyone.
I think you should though. I think
Yeah, maybe
I'm
that's
always recruiting. I'm always recruiting.
maybe that's something that might happen. And if there's just one person maybe showing interest because of having read about this in the Slack community or listening to this, it was worthwhile already. I mean, right now, mostly I'm just lurking around, seeing what people in the Slack community come up with, because I'm interested. And but I don't have anything to contribute there right now, because I have some topics I'm working on right now, and so I'm not looking for more work or stuff to get involved with.
Yeah, it's definitely a strange times living through this lockdown where everybody's being furloughed and kind of bummed out that there's no job offerings, and I'm like, there's so much to do.
Yeah,
There's where
yeah.
to start.
Yeah, because maybe we are just seeing the start of yeah, the world needing us to build this anew from the ground up.
Mm-hmm. It's like tectonic shifts in opportunities and incentives that I think, because we're kind of in the middle of it, we don't see it grow. But I was just looking through the website of BTCPay and actually updating my BTCPay instance, and I was just thinking, wow, this just in a year came along so far.
Oh
And
boy, yeah.
it's moving slowly, but it's so steady and it's
Yeah,
so
it's steady.
relentless.
It's like TikTok next block. Every
Yeah.
10 minutes we are progressing a bit further, and yeah, as long as we don't come to a halt, we are steadily progressing and yeah, re-architecting the future of money.
I'm really excited, and it actually uplifts my spirit a little bit, because it actually gives me something to look forward in the upcoming years, as opposed to just
Yeah, correct. It
throwing
it
it.
also gives me hope. It's satisfying, and even if I'm not not, or maybe we are not seeing this in our lifetime. I'm building this for my kids and grandkids, or at least helping to contribute to their future being brighter as it seems right now.
Absolutely. And you see this evolving technology, and I definitely missed out on the mass internet adoption. And sometimes I feel, oh, wouldn't it be so exciting to be there in the beginning of these amazing projects that are now the most valuable companies in the world? And this is a little bit how I see it. Like I can see BTC Pay becoming just like dethroning any other. I was gonna say taking the place of Shopify, but it actually has the potential to either taking the place of Shopify, Squarespace, and all the other e-com platforms are just being plainly adopted. Or I would hope to see it just removing all these like monolithic companies out of the map. But if they, maybe it's just a matter of them adopting, and it becomes
Yeah, I think giving
ubiquitous.
people at least the option to use something other than one of the big players, and giving them the chance to take everything into their own hands and build something that allows them to be self-sovereign is a great thing to work on, and that's why I'm dedicating my time to this.
Yeah, well, we all now know that there's work to be done in BTC Pay. It's gratifying. We we now have the pitch. I subscribe to that absolutely.
Awesome.
I think everybody really appreciates the work, even though sometimes it's hard to understand who exactly is doing what without having to go through all the commits. But yeah, I see great things in the
Yeah.
horizon for the near future.
Yeah, I mean, everything in open source is a team effort. It's 95% of the things are built with many great minds coming together, and I think it's important that everyone tries to contribute what he or she can, and let's build something great together here.
It's a great note to end this on. So I know you have a website where you accept donations. You're also on Twitter. Yeah,
Yeah,
what your handle is?
my full name,
Your full
Dennis
name? Yes,
Reimann.
I found your old handle. I think I've actually followed you for quite a while, but somehow I clicked on a link and I went to your old handle, and it's like, oh, what?
Yeah, I
Two
deleted
tweets? I was
my Twitter account, I guess 2 years ago or something like that, because I was so fed up with Twitter, and yeah, then I felt the urge to come back.
yeah, you're back. Dennis, thank you so much. It was great talking to you. I hope that we keep in touch, and sometime in the future, maybe even work together or
Yeah,
come up with interesting things to challenge other designers into joining our Bitcoin and open design efforts.
awesome. Thanks for inviting me. Thanks
It
again,
was a
and
pleasure.
enjoy the rest of your day.
You too. Thank you so much.
Bye bye.
Bye.